Hello book lovers, and welcome back or welcome to Nat Cat's Bookish Cafe. Today I have 5 YA horror or thrillers to recommend to you. Alright guys, so every once in a while I want to do a short recommendation video. It seems like a easy way to get some specific recommendations out there without overwhelming you with 10 plus books. What I usually do is I collect books of a certain genre or trope, and once I've collected 5 that are 4 or more stars, I will do a recommendation video such as this. I will admit that I'm relatively behind, so usually I would say this is a recommendation video of 5 YA horror thrillers that I recently read, but honestly it has been a hot second since I read some of these, so hopefully my synopses are still good. Just know that all of these were rated 4 or more stars, and therefore I highly recommend them. Alright, we're going to go ahead and jump right into the first recommendation. This is one that you will usually see in that empty spot on my favorite shelf, and that is Ace of Spades by Faraday Abeke Amedi. This is a, I would say, YA horror with social commentary. So I think some people call it kind of like social horror. This is marketed pretty perfectly as Gossip Girl meets Get Out. In this book, we are following the 2 Black students at a private high school. We have Chiamaka, who is part of a wealthy Black family, and she is also very involved with school activities, very on top of her grades, and wants to be the student president, I believe it is. And on the other side, we have Devon, and he is from what they call the other side of the tracks. I guess you could consider him a scholarship student. He is very much a loner. He kind of tries to avoid people at school, but one day, to Devon's surprise and to Chiamaka's excitement, they are both named senior prefects. I have to admit at this point, I don't remember what a prefect is supposed to do, basing it off like the Harry Potter people. I'm assuming they're supposed to kind of keep an eye on everything, keep an eye on the younger students, make sure that things go smoothly. And as they start trying to do this, they start facing some difficulties in the form of text messages that seem to know some things about Devon and Chiamaka that they don't want people to know. I rated this book 5 stars. Obviously, it's on my all-time favorite shelf. I just remember reading it and not wanting to put it down. It's one of those books where things definitely start to gradually escalate and then things quickly get out of control. The story is also queer. Devon is a young gay man, and we do see him start to form a relationship with another boy from his, I believe it's from his neighborhood, throughout this story. And Chiamaka, I believe, is bisexual representation since she is dating a boy. However, she does develop some feelings for a girl throughout the story as well. I really enjoy horrors and thrillers where our characters have something to hide. I think it adds an extra layer to the story, adds some extra intensity, increases the stakes of the story. This book obviously has quite a bit of social commentary when it comes to race, but not only when it comes to race, but socioeconomic status and what it means to be a wealthy Black person compared to a Black person that is living in what could be considered the hood, where there is some drug and gang activity occurring. If you're looking for a story with a strong female lead, I highly suggest this book. I really think Chiamaka is the one that takes the reins. She is someone who is very used to taking control of her life and fighting for her position in it. And she very much drags Devon along with her. She's like, we ain't putting up with this shit. So we need to make a stand and we need to protect ourselves. So she does a wonderful job of fighting against the bullying and the racism and the threats that they face within this book. The next 4 books I do not physically own. I listen to them all via audiobook, which I do recommend you try out for these next 4. It is my preference to listen to thrillers and horror. I do think it adds an interesting extra layer to the story. Up first, we have Monday Is Not Coming by Tiffany D. Jackson, and I ended up giving this book a 4.5 stars. In this book, we are meeting a high schooler named Claudia, and she shows up on the first day of school and realizes that her best friend Monday did not show up. She's not heard from Monday for the majority of the summer since she was off visiting family, and the two of them have been doing pretty much everything together for many years. So it was very unusual for Monday not to be there and not to contact her. As the days go by and Monday still doesn't show up, there seems to be people making excuses for why she's not there, saying that she's sick, that she's at her father's house, and so forth. And people seem not to be concerned that this young woman who was very present in our main character's life has suddenly disappeared into thin air. This is one of those books where I was relatively entertained for the majority of the story, but it wasn't really until we got to the ending when I realized exactly how complex and layered this story was. I don't want to go into too many details, obviously, because the ending was, at least for me, quite a jaw dropper. I was very upset and disturbed by this ending. I think it was an excellent ending, especially for a YA story. It was incredibly impactful and very memorable. So I read this book months ago and I still think about this ending on quite a regular basis. This book also deals with bullying. Claudia and Monday used to kind of come together to help each other when it came to their bullying situation. They were each other's protectors and their strength, and Claudia now finds herself on her own. Obviously, emotions are running high. She's scared for her friend. No one is taking her seriously. And in fact, some people at school are making situations worse by teasing her for her concern for her friend, especially since there were some rumors going around that the two of them were in a relationship. This is once again one of those books where things are gradually going to escalate and there's going to be a turning point when you realize that things have very much gone wrong, and there's a part of you that kind of wonders how you missed the signs. So I think that Tiffany Jackson did an incredible job writing this book, and I highly suggest that you give it a try, especially the audiobook, because there were some sound effects that the author was doing towards the end that I feel like if you just read it on the page wouldn't have been quite as uncomfortable as they were to listen to. Up next, we have A Skin Full of Shadows by Frances Hardinge, and this is one of those books that I read a little while ago, so I apologize if I'm a little shaky on it. This book was very interesting, but I felt to a degree that it was a little bit odd as well, which makes it a little hard to summarize. Pretty much we have a young girl who is able to I believe she's able to see ghosts, but she is also the kind of body that a lot of ghosts want to possess. And so she has kind of spent her life learning how to prevent herself from getting possessed. However, there is an event that occurs that ends up allowing a ghost to possess her. And this is the ghost of a bear that had been trapped for entertainment and eventually died. Our main character, her name is Makepeace, finds herself with this ghost inside her, going to work for a new family. In fact, I believe it's a family that her mother, before she died, had told her very strictly to avoid. However, she and her mother didn't have that great of a relationship, and so she decides to ignore her, which never works out well for our characters. I think we can usually agree. Anyway, when she shows up to this family, she realizes that there is something very strange going on and that she and her bear are in some danger. This book is set in a historical setting during a time where a country is on the brink of civil war. I'm assuming that this is an actual historical event, but I have to admit I do not remember where or when they are. I'm not a history girly, but it definitely added to the chaos of the story. This is a very gloomy fall time story. You spend your time walking through the woods with the fog, you're on battlefields, you're dealing with the injured and the sick, you're dealing with ghosts, both violent and peaceful and desperate. And you're dealing with a girl who is trying to find some semblance of peace and control over everything that is occurring to her. I felt that the secret of this family was very interesting, and I believe at the time of reading the story, it was very much my first time reading a trope like this, so it was definitely a bit of a shock to me that that was what was happening, and I thought that it was very creative on the side of the author. I also felt that the story had very beautiful writing that lent itself very well to the gloomy historical kind of almost gothic setting that we were dealing with. Once again, we are following a strong female lead in this story who sometimes just needs to clean up the mess of the men around her. She's definitely a character that you will find yourself rooting for. Our second to last book is another 5-star read, and that is House of Hollow by Crystal Sutherland. This is a book that follows 3 sisters. We are specifically following the point of view of Iris, and I believe she is the youngest of the 3. One day, Iris and her 2 sisters disappeared. They were standing next to their parents one second, and then they disappeared into thin air in the next. Their parents were obviously very frantic during this time, and it ended up being a big news story as well, as the 3 girls reappeared from the woods. The girls did not return unchanged though. Each of them possessed a new scar on their chest. Their mother was obviously incredibly happy to have her children back. However, their father was convinced that something else returned from the woods in their place. This eventually drove their father to madness, and he ended up killing himself. One by one, Iris's sisters left as well due to a strained relationship with their mother, leaving Iris all alone and being the main focus of her mother's obsession with keeping her safe and close. At the beginning of this book, her sisters return to their home, and it looks like something may be hunting them, and it seems to be coming from wherever the girls disappeared to all those years ago. Once again, this was a story that was really beautifully written. I love horror stories that have beautiful writing. I think it adds a lot to the eerie atmosphere of the story. I happen to be a rather big fan of what I call nature horror, where the horror involves insects and worms and plant life, and this story definitely had those aspects. I think I would say that the story almost has a slight dark fae aspect to it, just in the sense that we get glimpses of a world that is kind of the twisted, upside down version of the human world. I also really enjoyed the themes of sisterhood within this book. I would say that that is a relatively big part of the story. The sisters had spent many years apart, and now they are coming together to kind of fight this creature that is trying to pick them off one by one. I felt that the story had a very beautiful yet slightly heartbreaking ending that was a very satisfying conclusion to the story. And the final recommendation is going to be The Honeys by Ryan LaSala. This seems to be a bit of a controversial book in that people either really seem to enjoy it and highly recommend it, or are completely disappointed or absolutely hate it. Once again, this is a horror that I would put on the side of nature horror, which is probably one of the reasons that I liked it. Another reason is that the story is rather queer. In this book, we are following Mars, and they are gender fluid. They go by pretty much any pronoun, especially depending on how they are presenting. I'm just going to use they, them pronouns, since to me that kind of encompasses a person, no matter where they are at that moment. Mars had a twin sister, and they used to go to this camp together, but after Mars started presenting as gender fluid, there was an event that occurred that caused them to leave the camp and never return. However, their sister continued to go each summer, which they weren't always the most happy about, but of course they weren't going to prevent her from going. However, one day their sister ends up dying, and Mars is convinced that something happened at the camp to cause her to act out in the way that she did that eventually led to her death. So Mars decides that they will go ahead and take their sister's place at the camp to see if they could figure out what is going on, especially because their sister was recently hanging out with a group called the Honeys. The Honeys are a group of girls that are a bit separate from the rest of the camp. The house that they live on is on the other side of the lake. They are very proper. When they walk into the room, everyone goes quiet. They are the center of attention. They are the girls you want to be friends with. They are the girls you want to be. And Mars starts to integrate themselves with these girls, and when they're doing that, they start to realize that they are very much falling into the girls' orbit, which is making it a bit more difficult for them to focus on the reason that they came there, which is to solve their sister's death. This was one of those books where every time I thought, okay, the twist has happened, we can all chillax now, I was wrong. There was always another twist. There were so many twists in this book, I was starting to develop some trust issues, to be honest. But that also made the story a lot of fun. The secluded setting of this camp added a lot to the atmosphere. Oftentimes you didn't know if our character was on their own or if they had allies at all. It was very difficult to trust anyone in this book. I would say alliance in this book seemed to kind of shift and flow throughout the story. I did think Miles was a wonderful main character. They were someone who were not going to conform. They're like, oh, I make you uncomfortable? Well, you need to change. I'm not going to change because I'm not doing anything wrong. And I really do like that point of view, because I don't think that it is a queer person's job to appear less queer to make you comfortable. And Mars was very much one of those characters where they're like, this is as I am, this is what you're gonna get kind of situation. I also really enjoyed the themes of sisterhood, and that was both between Miles and his sister, because we got some glimpses of their relationship throughout their story and how Mars felt about her. And then of course there was the relationship of the Honeys, which is very much a sisterhood as well. Overall, if you're looking for queer representation, isolated setting, camp setting, nature horror, if you're looking for a book with tons of twists and strong female and queer characters in it, then I think that you definitely need to check out this book, especially the audiobook. And hopefully, like me, you fall on the side of people who absolutely love it. All right, guys, so those are the 5 YA horror thrillers that I want to recommend to you. These you can obviously read at any time of the year. I think most of these I read outside of spooky season, but I mean, this is honestly the perfect time for this video and the perfect time to pick them up as well. Let me know down below if you have any recommendations for books within this genre. It's definitely one where I have quite a few on my list already that I'm excited to get to. I would also love to know your opinion on any of the books that I listed if you have already read them. As always, thank you so much for supporting my channel by watching my videos, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!